So hello and welcome to another segment of Intersections Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. My name is Elisa Gwilliam, and today I have the pleasure to be talking to Executive Director of Mental Health America Dutchess, Andrew O'Grady, and Professor of Psychology and Director of the Center of Aging and Disability Policy at Mount St. Mary's College, and co-founder of NOAR, the National Organization of Adult Addiction Recovery, Dr. Larry Force. And today we're going to spend some time talking about the upcoming holiday, Labor Day, and how socialization and the holiday weekend go hand in hand. So Andrew, why don't you start us off today?
Yeah, so it's interesting when we talk about addiction, we talk a lot about isolation, and in this COVID world, and the reason we spearheaded this project was because people have been isolated. So the typical holiday that you have concerns around drinking with is may or may not happen. People aren't really gathering in groups of 20 or 30, but we in this country have kind of gotten to a point where we basically get together with others, and immediately somebody feels like they have to open a bottle of something, and people have to drink. And it's rare that you have groups of people that don't feel like that has to be part of every social gathering. So it's always a time, Labor Day, 4th of July, Christmas, New Year's. These are times that those that want to stay completely clean and sober have a difficult time doing, or have to find people that are sober to be with because of the constant, alcohol around them. And then there are people who are trying to, maybe limit their drinking and be more careful and hydrate themselves. And we are a society that allows drinking, and not all drinking is bad, but it's a matter of how you handle yourself and how you hydrate yourself and how you manage your intake. So, I'm hoping that today we can talk a little bit about that, some strategies, and maybe some historical context around that drinking phenomenon in this country. So, Dr. Force.
Well, thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, Andrew. And, we talked offline prior to recording this today. And, we talked about, the holidays and interaction. And I was telling Andrew and Alyssa that a number of years ago, I was asked by the Alzheimer's Association to put together an article, a profile of holidays and Alzheimer's disease. And the interesting thing was that was really targeted towards the caregivers, the families, about how best to go about addressing the issue of, some of the behaviors that might appear. But our discussion is different. Our discussion is centered on the self, on the person. And we talked about this. I mean, look, drinking, even in some of the AA literature, the reference to drinking, this is really not about drinking that we're really addressing. It's really about the consumption of alcohol. People need to drink. They need to drink water. They need to drink coffee if they so desire, or tea or soda. So it's not about a behavior that involves hydration. It's about a behavior that involves the substance of alcohol. Or if it's not alcohol, it's some other form of drug. And I think that, as we talked about, certain rituals, gatherings, traditions, beginning of summer, end of summer, beginning of the holidays, end of the holidays. In many traditions, the use of alcohol is embedded. And again, as Andrew said, let's be clear, we're not here in any fashion to talk about, tearing down the use of alcohol. What we're really here to do is be present for individuals that are dealing with abuse, self-abuse, the abusiveness of it. I heard somebody say one time that the only addiction they had was one. And when I asked them what it was, they said it's to more, M-O-R-E. And that's an interesting take, being addicted to more. We had Catherine Sajak on as a guest. She was a wonderful guest a couple of episodes ago. And, she comes out of the school of abstinence is the only way, except when we catch up to her later on in practice, she's talking about, harm reduction maybe. There was a whole movement about smart recovery, the whole movement about, moderation management, the whole movement about the small book from the Albert Ellis world of, you know, that rational emotive therapy. There are a multitude of doors to come in. But the point that we want to be able to make is the fact that, and you'll see an image that we reference all the time at some point during our discussion, there's no need for silos. And you don't have to do this alone. You know, in a conversation the other day, I mentioned something about recovery can be an isolated path. And the person said something which I thought was pretty interesting. They said, no, recovery is really not isolating, because recovery, you do it in companionship, you do it in fellowship, you do it in group or network. And he said, addiction is really isolating. And that's an interesting, you know, differentiation between the two. Addiction by itself, the self-defeating patterns, the rituals, the hidden gestures you have, you know, that isolate you, that put you into a, it's almost like a shadow world. You know, there's been a lot of writing done about the area of addictions and compulsions. And the interesting thing is that from my perspective, underneath all addictive patterns, you're going to find some type of compulsive hub. And it's just coming out in some way. Whether it be obsessing on peanut butter or whether it be obsessing on tea bags, it's coming out. And the idea is how to go about addressing it. And the talking therapy, the fellowship type of approach, the camaraderie, that seems to work. I mean, one of the things that's recommended is this whole focus on, you know, people, places, and things. You know, some people can, you know, reunite themselves with certain patterns, okay, without, you know, violating their own commitment to live a sober life. Other people, it's like kryptonite. They need to stay away from it, especially at the beginning. I mean, we know for a fact that there's a difference between early phases of recovery and later. We also know for a fact that families have a tendency to get better slower. Person goes into rehab, the person steps away from the substance of use, alcohol or drug, they're starting to feel good. And then they're wondering why everybody around them is not applauding them. Well, maybe this is the 15th time. I mean, I have come in contact with a number of people, one that just resonates with me. He was in 15 rehabs before he got it. Now, the fact is, think about all the bridges that were burnt along the way. But yet, today, 20 years of sobriety, he's very proud of the fact that, you know, that he was able to, on that 15th one, something happened.
And it took him time probably to get his life back. I mean, to get people to trust him again and not think he's going to, you know, mess up again.
I mean, you know, one of the biggest shifts in paradigm is when you realize for your family system, for your mate, for your kids, for whoever, that you can become part of the solution and not part of the problem. Yeah. Because families typically, you know, they don't go quietly into this. I mean, some families are rallying around you, chasing you, you know, back and forth from hospital to hospital, trying to get you help, trying to understand why you don't understand. And I really am of the belief that sometimes it's not long-term psychotherapy that wakes you up. It's a moment. It's some type of moment that all of a sudden, I mean, one of the things that's talked about in the fellowship literature is the whole idea of being spiritually bankrupt. You know, are you connected to anything? And typically when you get to that pattern where you're isolating, you're separating yourself from others, you know, what happens? You know, you're not connected. And now, oh, by the way, we have COVID. You know?
And you have to look at why you're doing what, you know, what got you to the point of not feeling connected. That means that, you know, it's clear that people are looking at you in a different way now in your socialization patterns. So you're feeling uncomfortable with that, and it evolves over time. You know, I do the OASIS drinking driver evaluations, and the point of that evaluation is to determine if someone is in need of treatment. And I'm a little more liberal than other places. And, you know, I drinking is legal, and, you know, people can drink, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's a problem, like you indicated. But so we explore, you know, what it is. Obviously they got a DWI, so that's a big negative in the checkbox. There's something bad happened and a bad result of their drinking. But you look at, you know, what happens in their life, and, you know, do you have negative consequences in your life? Do you have bad things that have happened to you? And can you tie them to alcohol? And maybe that's how you figure out whether or not you have an issue, or you need to cut back, or you need to stop completely. The AA world says, you know, stop completely. They don't want you to drink at all. And many of them are right. They've convinced themselves, or it's true, that if they have one drink, they're going to end up, in Atlantic City and, drinking for 4 days and they'll be dead. Um, and that keeps them sober. And then other people have a hard time getting there. So it's, how do they, so they're not convinced they need to stop altogether, or they need that, that abstinence. And it's a matter of exploring with people, where they are. You had mentioned the families and the Alzheimer's and it being an impact on the family members. But that, I was listening to that and I was thinking that's the same thing with family get-togethers on holidays. There's usually that one family member that everybody knows by the end of the night is going to be a complete disaster, and what kind of chaos is going to come out of this. And so it's watched throughout the night, and people's levels of anxiety goes up, as the progression of the intoxication happens. So it does impact family members, and it obviously impacts that person. But the family is impacted by it too. And you have to look at, is your drinking impacting others negatively? And do you get to that point where you're isolating and alone because you don't like the feeling of being around people who are looking at you and judging you, or, where people are quiet? Do you think that's one too many drinks for you? Maybe you should put that down. And that doesn't feel good. So now you're home alone drinking.
Yeah. In my theories of social casework course, I use a solution-focused paradigm. I arrived at that over being exposed to different types of orientations. Behavioral, psychoanalytic, and eventually I was introduced to the solution-focused. And it was like a breath of fresh air, because of the fact that one of the things they talk about, if it's not broken, don't try to fix it. The other thing they talk about is, if the miracle happens, you go to sleep tonight and tomorrow you wake up and you're living the life you really want to live. What's that look like? And how do you act differently? And the other thing that they move away from is this fixation on diagnosis. Alyssa, would you be able to bring up our image that we introduced? Now, this is an image of a former psychiatric center that is tumbling to the ground with intent. And the reason is because of the fact that this was a paradigm of treatment back in 1905, 1906, and then institute. This is the main building at Hudson River Psychiatric Center in Poughkeepsie, New York, that is being torn down to be replaced by homes and shops, because that's not the way we go about our treatment orientation anymore. And we've had this conversation, and every time we bring this up, we take a look at those doors. And behind each door, there was a person with a family, with a story. And most of these places, the institutions were built 90 miles outside of metropolitan areas. They were hidden. And now it's being, torn down. And as the tagline says, mental health at its best, the tearing down of walls. And Andrew is a big proponent of that, getting rid of the silos. So in this theories of social casework class, one of the first exercises I have the students do is do a genogram, which is a 3-generation profile of their family. Because typically in our field, it's very easy for us to meet somebody, start the therapeutic intervention, and one of the first things we say is, tell us about your family. And then we sit back. And what I want the students to understand is, what does that really feel like, talking about your family? Because every family has stuff, every family has currency, every family has shadows and secrets and shame, but every family has strengths too. So when they do this 3-generation profile, and when they have to answer 5 indicators, if they answer it and it's all about the negative, I return it to them. Because I tell them, look, families, not every family looks like yours, but regardless of how your family looks, there are positives. Maybe it's resiliency. Some families only know how to respond to chaos. They don't really know how to cruise. And that was an interesting, statement that somebody provided one time. That your family in particular, doesn't seem to know how to cruise. They only know how to do the chaos and put the fires out. Well, that sounds like a problem, but it's also a sense of resiliency. And I think that, when you look at the patterns of behavior, and look, we're in a new world. We're arriving in your world through a technological platform underneath the COVID quarantine. A round of applause to all of us. Okay, not only for us to be able to produce this, but for you to be able to view it and walk away with a sense of, you know what, hope. You know, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to do this alone. And Andrew, maybe you could talk a little bit about, you know, because I think it's an important statement about that whole focus of break down those silos. We're talking about addictions, but you come out of a paradigm of mental health. And yet here we are together as a collective voice.
Yeah, I had a meeting today with Jim Ball, who was a guest earlier, and one of the things he said, which really gave me hope, was that he just took his certified peer recovery coach test and he passed it, and he was telling me about the test, and he was shocked. This is for the OASAS silo, the peer certification, and he was shocked at the amount of mental health questions that were part of that exam, and that made me happy because you're meeting people with addiction issues, and they 90, what's the stat, 90% of them come from some mental health diagnosis or some trauma in their life, and the people with mental health diagnosis, 40% of them have addiction issues. I just by saying that, we're talking about putting things in silos, and I don't like it. These are people. They're just people with stuff, and everybody has stuff. And I just don't like that our system, and I get it in the beginning, this is the way it had to be, but we're still in that system where, if somebody calls for an appointment with somebody, they do a brief questionnaire on a phone, and and all of a sudden, because you said, I drink a little before I go to bed, or all of a sudden you're being categorized and placed in a different silo, in one of the silos, as opposed to just having somebody treat you holistically and look at everything and get to the core of why you might be having a drink that night. So I think we're getting there. I think it's slow. I'll tell you something happened between now and our last presentation or webcast. We got an email from Barbara Callahan, who works at the Hudson River Field Office for OMH. And she was talking about this picture, and she sent us a great email saying she found our discussion very helpful. And she referenced the museum at Hudson River State Hospital, that even though they're tearing that whole thing down, somewhere on those grounds, there's still the museum. And I'm embarrassed to say that I've been living 5 minutes from this place for 25 years and still have not gone to that museum. And she pointed out that every clinician should go to that museum to see the history of what it was in those walls. And yes, they were families. Many times those families were not families anymore, because many times the families gave up and just put people there. These were people that lived there and had a life. They had bowling alleys and farming, and they had everything there. But at the same time, they didn't have great treatment for the mental health symptoms they had, and the treatment was pretty archaic, hoses and chains. And MHA, Mental Health America, the national organization, has a bell, and that bell was born out of a call by Clifford Beers, the founder of MHA, for all these places like this picture to send in your chains and your shackles that you use in those places. And they took it all, people donated it, they gave it, and they melted it all down and made this beautiful bell. And that bell is rung at every annual meeting. And it cast away the chains and the shackles. We are progressing in a positive way toward helping others and doing it in a person-centered way, and a focus on the whole person, and not a punitive way, is where we want to get to. And we're getting there. And there's trainings on it, and there's a focus on it. And our system of care is not perfect, but it's certainly getting better. And I'm hoping that this platform of discussion and other platforms like this are really going to educate people and continue to stay focused on doing the right and positive thing for the people we serve.
Building upon what you're saying, and I say this with a true sense of humility, that in many ways we're leading the way. And that's how this whole platform was born and launched, because we wanted to elevate the discussion to not only a local and a state, but also a national level. I mean, think about the name of our video cast. intersections, policy, program, and practice exchange. It's not just about the individual therapeutic intervention, it's about the programs that are developed. I remember years ago, I'd worked for the state, and I was up on the western part of the state, and somebody told me about a program where they were keeping everybody, this is an arena of people with intellectual disabilities, they were keeping everybody out of nursing homes. So I wanted to see how this was done. So I go up there, and it's the Lexington model, as they called it, and it's great. They were keeping people out of nursing homes. So I go down to Manhattan to go to this, what was called at that point, a Willowbrook committee meeting. And I walk in and I start talking to the advocates about this Lexington model. They didn't want to hear it anymore because I used the M word, and the M word was model. And their fear as advocates was that somebody somewhere was building a prototype, and they're going to come back and say, you, and you. And their whole focus, and it has now morphed over to other fields, including, addiction and recovery, it's self-directed. What may work for one person may not work for the other. And I think that, with us having this type of exchange and the people that we have brought to the table that represent policy, program, and practitioners, and the other people that are on the list that come to the table, I think we're truly doing what we said we were going to do, which was to give a national voice to this discussion. What's helped? The use of technology. As I tell my students, there's two things you take into a family's life today: your heart and an awareness of technology. If you can only take one, you take your heart. But you can't act as though technology doesn't exist. It'd be like acting like, electricity doesn't exist. It's here. And I think that we can use it in a very, benevolent, helpful way. And if you can only take one, you take your heart, because that's what, families need presence. There are some times that regardless of the words are meaningless. When you're in that arena, that everything that people are saying to you, even though you don't want to hear it, and you've built these walls around you, walls of denial or resistance, they're telling you the truth. And then sometimes it's just a moment, it's just a second, something happens and there's a shift. And that person that, if I could bring that person to the table right now with 15, attempts of rehab, what would they tell you? Don't give up. It's never too late. Don't give up. Our national organization, myself and Jim Ball and Dave Brinkerhoff, we formed a national organization of adult addiction and recovery. And that's how we got involved in this. And that's what's kind of given birth to the other, areas that we're looking at. And that was funded, and we're very much appreciative of and supported by the Kaplan Family Foundation. And what is it about? It's about being present for adults, because the recovery in adulthood, especially different parts of adulthood, is different than the recovery for the adolescent. You tell the adolescent at 16 years old, stop doing that behavior. You'll get your license back. You'll be able to develop a relationship. Get a job. But somebody that's in their 70s or 60s, what are you telling them? You're going to get your license back. You're going to get a job. No, it's really about a shift in time. And it's an idea about legacy building. If you stop doing the behavior you're doing that is giving concern to family, maybe your daughter will allow you to hold your grandchild without fear that you're going to drop the child. So it's a whole different paradigm and shift. And I think that.
Yeah, I was meeting with a woman the other day who in my private practice, and she's been clean and sober now for 7 months. She's doing fantastic. And it's amazing when people just stop drinking altogether, if they've been over drinking. They physically feel so much better. But the story related to what you just said is that her father had been a drinker his whole life. And for some reason, she knew what her impetus was for stopping. For some reason, and she doesn't know his, but he stopped. He stopped using alcohol. And for the past 3 months, she has a father, which she never had in her life. And you're talking about legacy, and he's now actually explaining, all this stuff that he did and what he wants to accomplish now. He's 80 years old, but what he wants to accomplish going forward, and he's thinking clearly. And I said, how does that make you feel? And she said, I just feel, she teared up, and she said, I just can't believe I have a father. And her daughter is like, what is going on with grandpa? It's not crazy grandpa anymore. Like, what is going on? But he's great. He's sitting, he's having conversations at dinner. He's talking about, what kind of legacy he wants to leave for her. And it's just a fantastic relationship that was born out of, him deciding to get sober. And you never know what that is. I always ask people when they're clean and sober, what was that moment after that 15th rehab? What was that moment that got you? What was that thing that got you to finally stop? And every story's different. So I wish there was a cookie cutter thing. I wish we could, as therapists, just be able to make that thing happen for them. But it's different for every single person. You could probably give some philosophical reason about what comes together for them at that moment, but better than I can. But whatever it is, it's there. And you're right. Our homeless shelter, the living room, has a number of people with addiction issues. And we historically have let them come in, even if they're drunk, to sleep it off or whatever. And we always ask when they sobered up a little bit, we're here for you. Can we get you into treatment? I don't need treatment. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't have a problem. And then there's that one time, because we didn't turn them away and we didn't ban them. And there's that one day that comes and they're like, I think I need treatment. And they go in, and maybe it sticks, maybe it doesn't, but at least they go, and we never give up. We're there for them. And you ask them 100 times, and one of the times they're going to say yes.
Sometimes it's an epiphany. It's, I keep snapping my fingers because that's how quick it happens. Other times you work towards it. Yeah. Even if you're involved in, because look, some people come to our table willingly. Some people come escorted, maybe through the, recommendation of a boss or the threat of a boss. If you don't stop drinking, you're going to lose, or using drugs, you're going to lose your job, or a family, or a court system. No matter how you arrived here, it's not how you arrived, it's how you move forward. And one of the things that we talk about, through the NOAR connection is the fact that regardless of age, you're a resource worth investment in, because it's not really about age. I'm reading this other book now by Julia Cameron. Julia Cameron, we had Mark Bryan on. He and Julia Cameron co-authored The Artist's Way. Well, this one is a later edition that she did on her own. I think the title of it is It's Never Too Late to Start Again. And it's an interesting 12-week program about, how to harness creativity. And one of the things that she said, which I underscored, highlighted the whole bit, she said, artists never retire. I love that statement. Artists never retire, because retiring would be almost like a form of separating and divorcing yourself. And when it comes to this idea of recovery, the last person you want to have give up on yourself is you. Yep. And the fact is that, there is hope. There's a new path, and how that path looks like, a lot of it depends on, what you're hoping it looks like. So we're not presenting a model, it's not a cookie cutter type of thing. But the fact is we are presenting options. And one of the options we have is not only this Intersections, the exchange, but also the Intersections program. It's called Intersections, a day program without walls. And what's the focus? The focus is finding new ways to entertain yourself in a healthy way, maybe through meditation, maybe being vigilant about nutrition, maybe getting up and move. There's an old saying, move a muscle, change a thought. That's very true. I mean, you can sit wherever you want, okay? And you can be somber, and you can be overwhelmed by anger and resentment, or you can get up and change a thought. And I think all of us, the three of us on this video cast here, could give examples of how that has worked for us. So I think, the message today is, the holidays are coming. Yeah, they're expected to come. And there's life beyond the holiday. And you don't have to be absorbed by the rituals. You don't have to be standoffish, but there are things that you can do in order to be able to get to the other side of those holidays, and you don't have to do it alone. Maybe, again, as we summarize this, maybe you could talk about the role of MHA being present 24/7, 365 for people. And it's not only your agency, but the whole MHA network nationally. That yep. Maybe you could talk about how people just raise their hand and hello.
Yeah, get to know your MHA in your community, no matter where you are. MHAs are a great resource. And I find that, you know, we're not unique here in Dutchess County. All the MHAs that I deal with on a regular basis up and down the Hudson River region, and I've gotten to know people out in Western New York, and I've spoken to the lady in Hawaii, and they all seem to embody the same ideal, which is be present, be available, be supportive, no wrong door. So I can tell you from the perspective of our MHA and Dutchess, and the rest are like that, you reach out to us, and we're not going to be, and I'm going to acknowledge that it's out there. We're not going to be that person that says, you know, we don't do that. And then that's it. Because you can call, you know, people accessing care is extremely frustrating. I mean, try cold calling yourself if you're not. Pick up the phone, try to figure out who to call and how to access care. Who accepts your insurance, who doesn't? Who has openings, who doesn't? It's frustrating. But our MHA will help you get there, and we will walk you through it, and we'll go down the path of wrong door with you, and we'll figure it out with you, and you'll be connected to somebody that will help. So we're available. Other MHAs are available. No matter where you are in the country, look it up. Mental Health America, National Mental Health America. You can look that up, and you can go on their website, and you can punch in your zip code and find out where the MHAs are in your area. And again, we may not be the provider of the exact service you need, but we're going to figure it out for you and help you get to what you need.
You know,
Fantastic.
I'm not, I just want to summarize this one statement. I'm not saying this just because you're on this video. You do a spectacular job in leading this Mental Health of America, the chapter here.
Thank you.
Tip of the hat.
So we just really want you to remember that you're not alone. Whether you reach out to MHA local chapter or MHA national, we're there for you. So thank you for joining us today. And you've been listening to Intersections Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange. If you want to hear this program again or share it with friends, you can log on to the Digital Resource Center on our website, www.intersections-exchange.com. So that's www.intersections-exchange.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So we hope you join us again next week as we continue the conversation on Intersections Policy, Program, and Practice Exchange.